Hi, everybody. I'm Tanya Pahuja, and I'm a technical account manager here at AWS. And I'm based out of Delhi, India. Welcome to AWS Supports You, where AWS Support experts provides tips to optimize performance in the cloud, lower cost, and provides you with the best practices and design considerations. Joining me today are Naveen and Anoop from AWS Support. Can you give us a quick introduction, Naveen and Anoop?
Thanks, Tanya. So, hello everyone. My name is Naveen Kumar Jindal, and I'm a technical account manager based out of Delhi, India. I have over 8 years of experience in the OTT and broadcast industry, and I support a lot of AWS enterprise customers in India with the OTT workflow. Over to you, Anup, for your introduction.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm Anup. I work as a senior technical account manager. I'm based out of Bangalore, India. I manage a large OTT media customers account. I'm part of the ISV or the so-called SaaS segment, which manages the software as a service customers.
Thank you, Naveen, and thank you, Anu. Today, we'll be introducing you to an ad insertion service called AWS Elemental MediaTailor. We will also talk about how MediaTailor helps in the monetization of your OTT streams, as well as talk about some basic troubleshooting. But before we get into the details, a quick note to the attendees online. Feel free to use the chat window on the right hand side of your screen to let us know where you are joining us from today and also share your thoughts and questions throughout the episode. We look forward to hearing from you. We would also provide you a link to your survey so that you would let us know how we did during the episode and leave your feedback. With that, Naveen, can you walk us through what all we are going to be covering today?
Thanks, Tanya. So, we will begin by talking about an AWS Enterprise customer success story and show how AWS Enterprise support helped the customer go from proof of concept to a full fledged production model. We will then see some ways to monetize OTT video and then talk about ad insertion in OTT video, which will typically cover client side and server side ad insertion. We'll then talk about basic live and on demand OTT workflows and see how AWS Elemental Media Tailor integrates in those workflows. We'll then show two demos, one covering a live ad insertion and the other covering troubleshooting live ad insertion issues with AWS CloudWatch. And then we'll talk about best practices to be followed while contacting AWS support, and then wind up the session by sharing some important links which will help you get started with your journey towards AWS Elemental Media Tailor. So, without further ado, let us get started. I would now hand over to my colleague Anoop, who would talk about an enterprise customer success story and explain how AWS Enterprise Support helped the customer. Over to you, Anoop.
Thank you so much, Naveen, for sharing the agenda. Now, let's take a look at an AWS enterprise customer success story as to how Elemental Media Tailor helped them to monetize their OTT streams. Talking about this AWS enterprise customers background, they are a major broadcaster with presence across the globe. They manage 1,000 plus live channels, which are encoded by Media Live as well as other third party encoders. The use case was pretty straightforward. They needed a simple server side ad insertion solution, or the so called SSAI solution, with detailed monitoring and support for multiple devices, which requires HLS and dash streaming. They also wanted a solution which would easily integrate into their existing video workflows without the need for them making any architectural changes. Now, let me throw some light on the challenges the customers were facing in their current platforms. The biggest challenge which the customer was facing was ease of integration and faster rollout along with scalability. Their next problem was low ad fill ratio for new advertisements. New ad insertions were constantly getting missed for the first few users who were onto their systems. Thereby, they were losing an opportunity to actually monetize their ads. Another problem was lack of detailed monitoring and granular reporting, which would help them to identify certain bottlenecks which were causing ad insertion issues in the first place. So, the customer being an AWS enterprise support customer approach their AWS technical account manager for an overall help around this. So I connect with the Elemental MediaTailor product teams and SMEs, and the customers were arranged. AWS teams then conducted various architectural reviews. We had deep dive immersion days and workshops under enterprise support. This really helped the customer to launch a successful proof of concept or the POC. This proof of concept gradually transpired into a fully fledged scalable production solution. The end product had more than 500 media tailor configurations covering on demand and live use cases. The scalability issues were addressed as media tailors is generally available across multiple AWS regions. Per the customer's demand, the infrastructure was seamlessly scaling in the background as well. The ad fill ratio for new advertisements was improved by using the prefetch feature. Using this prefetch feature, with the help of a single API call, the transcoded advertisements were made available for an upcoming popular live event. It also helped to prevent any underfilled ad breaks, which resulted in actually increased monetization. Finally, as MediaTailor is well integrated with CloudWatch, they were able to create monitoring dashboards with pre-created and custom matrices to monitor the overall health of their ad insertion infrastructure. They also use CloudWatch insights to troubleshoot in detail the CloudWatch logs. With the successful product, within a period of 6 months, they were able to imprint close to a billion advertisements per month for their end customers. Hope you had some insights on the information that I just covered. I'll now hand over to Naveen to walk through and cover monetization of OTT and other related topics.
Thanks, Anup. Before I talk about monetizing OTT video, I would like to check with Tanya if there are any questions from the audience about the customer success story that we shared.
Thanks, Naveen. I don't see any questions from the audience yet, so I think we are good to move on.
Thanks, Tanya. We will now take a look at basic monetization models in OTT streams. So, one of the most common ways to monetize OTT streams is subscription based and then transaction based. So, subscription based is a model where user typically pays for a service which is usually monthly, annual, quarterly, or biannual. The subscription model either provides access to all the contents or a list of channels depending upon the plans covered by the content provider. For example, users who are interested in sports would essentially purchase a sports pack, which will stream all the sports channel to the end users. And similar way, if they are interested in kids pack, they would be provided with all the kids channels, which would contain animated videos and stuff like that. And transaction based model is a model where users pay to access a single piece of content or stream. The charges can involve a rental fee or a pay per view for a live content. Since you own the content in both the models, you can play this across multiple devices or platforms. The major disadvantage with these models, where the revenue is directly proportional to the popularity, which would only come when the subscriber base would increase. As a result, the platform and the content providers started introducing advertisements to earn revenue from these streams. And with monetization, ad insertion would help the content providers monetize their streams. So, if we talk about evolution of OTT advertising, it can be classified into three parts. It started with burnt-in static advertisements, then it transpired into client-side advertising insertion, and finally, it resulted in server-side ad insertion. So, burnt-in advertisements basically is a process where all the end users would be presented with the same advertisement to all the users. It would mean that there would be no personalization at all. It then transpired into client side ad insertion because there was a need for some kind of personalization. So, in client side ad insertion, the advertisements would be inserted into the OTT streams where the logic would be completely reliant on the client that the people were using. The server side ad insertion model would introduce advertisements at the origin level itself. So, with server side insertion, the advertisements are inserted in the origin stream. thereby matching the renditions and other video artifacts. We will cover server side ad insertion in the upcoming slides to explain how server side insertion fixes the issue which we see in client side and burnt in static ads. So let us now take a look at some disadvantages of burnt in static advertisements. All the users would be presented with the same advertisements. So users would typically switch to another channel or content during an ad break as it was not relevant to them. As a result, the content owners were not able to provide important ad break slots to relevant advertisers, which resulted in revenue loss. This led to an innovation, and the advertisements in the stream began to be inserted on the client side to increase some personalization aspect. So with client-side ad insertion, the personalization did get introduced, but there were a lot of issues with it. Let us now take a look at some of the disadvantages or some of the drawbacks of client-side ad insertion. The biggest drawback was users could skip the advertisements from being played by using a tool or a software called an ad blocker. This was a huge revenue loss as the monetization in ad insertion is based on impressions sent by the player. If the advertisements are not played, impressions would not be sent out, which would cause revenue loss. Apart from this, with client side ad insertion, the entire logic was left on user devices. So there was a need to maintain and build code for multiple platforms and players, which required a lot of efforts. As the user base was typically spread across multiple devices, ranging from say Android phones to devices like Xbox or PlayStations, it was a huge effort to maintain code for different type of devices. And another issue, which was a major one, was ad fill ratio on desktops and web players was too low because it was very easy to install ad blocker softwares on these systems. And another issue was quality of advertisements in the client side ad insertion would not every time match the quality of the content streamed by the origin. As a result, the end users would see a bad quality video as compared to your original content stream. This contributed to bad viewership experience for the users. All in all, the client side ad insertion did increase personalization but came with a lot of disadvantages. As a result, the next step of evolution happened, which was server side ad insertion. So, let us now talk about some benefits of server side ad insertion. The first was improved quality of experience for the end users. The advertisement quality would match the content quality, thereby improving the viewership experience for the end users. Second was the advertisements were stitched in the original content stream, so it became difficult or next to impossible for ad blockers to identify the advertisement segments, and hence they would not be blocked. This resulted in increased revenue as the impressions were sent by the players, which would also increase. The third benefit was improved or increased personalization per user. The client side parameters would be sent to an ad decision server by the server side ad insertion, which would then respond with relevant advertisements for the user based on their preferences. As a result, in a single stream, one user might be watching, say, advertisements related to sports, where the other user might be presented with advertisements related to entertainment because the user preferences were sent to the ad decision server. Since the personalization aspect was introduced, the viewership also increased, and the viewers would not switch streams or channels during an ad break because the advertisements which were presented to them were relevant. And fourth was monetization. With all of the benefits that we just discussed, the content owners were able to monetize their video streams more effectively as no ad breaks were skipped because of increased personalization. The end users would not know if an advertisement segment is being played out at all with server side ad insertion. Having talked about different models of ad insertion, I'll check with Tanya if there are any questions from the users.
Yeah. One question, Naveen. I think audience would like to know on what is ad fill rate. If you can just enlighten and shed some light on that, please.
Sure. So ad fill rate basically is a ratio of the actual ad duration versus the number of advertisements that were filled in the ad break. For example, if your ad break was say 60 seconds long, ad fill ratio would do a 60 divided by number of advertisements filled, and the higher the ad fill rate, the higher is the opportunity to monetize. So all the server side ad insertion services would aim to ensure that the ad fill ratio remains as high as possible to increase monetization. Right. Having answered the question, let us now talk about some typical OTT workflow. Where we will talk about, a live workflow as well as a video on demand workflow. A typical live workflow would involve contribution from a live channel source, which is a camera in this case. The contribution would go into Elemental Media Live, which is a transcoder on the cloud by AWS uh, services. And the signal from Media Live would then go into a just in time packager called Elemental Media Package. So, Media Package would then convert the stream into a format like, say, HLS, Dash, smooth streaming, and CMAF based on the user preference, and would also do some kind of DRM integration by leveraging Speak. And finally, once the stream is packaged by Media Package, it would then be streamed to the end users with the help of a global CDN, which is Amazon CloudFront when we talk about AWS services. Having seen a live streaming workflow, let us now walk through a simple video on demand workflow. So, a simple video on demand workflow would contain source video files which are stored on a distributed storage system like S3, or any place which is accessible over HTTP or HTTPS. The video on demand files would then be fetched by Media Convert, Elemental Media Convert, which would transcode the files on the basis of user preferences and store the output on S3. And from here, the streams would be sent to the end user by leveraging a global CDN, which is Amazon CloudFront in this case. So I will now pass over to Anup to talk about how AWS Elemental MediaTailor integrates into live and video on demand workflow to show it is very seamless. Over to you, Anup.
Thank you so much, Naveen, for the great insights on the OTT workflow. Now let us look at how Elemental Media Tailor integrates into an existing video workflow and how to monetize with advertisements. AWS Elemental Media Tailor integrates seamlessly with any live workflow, with the only requirement being the need for SCTI markers in the origin stream. In a typical live streaming workflow with server-side ad insertion, the output from media package origin or the CDN has to go to Media Tailor. Media Tailor then interacts with the ad region server to fetch the list of advertisements which would be inserted into the stream. Media Tailor internally invokes services to transcode the advertisements based on underlying content stream, thereby matching the video renditions and the artifacts. The transcoded advertisement segments are then stored on an internal S3 bucket for future use. So once these advertisements are transcoded, they are stitched into the stream by including references to the advertisement segments. This way, users are presented with a single manifest with the content stream as well as the advertisement segments. This also prevents chances of ad skippings or blocking the user devices by any kind of ad blockers. A similar architecture was deployed by a major broadcaster in India to insert advertisements on their linear channels, and it was streamed live all over the country. In a similar way to live workflow, MediaTailor integrates with your on-demand workflow as well. MediaTailor is placed before the CDN to personalize your on-demand content by stitching advertisements to the VOD stream or the video on-demand stream. The advertisements are again returned by the ad agent server, which are transcoded by using internal services and stored on S3 for future use. A similar architecture was deployed by a leading OTT platform to monetize their on-demand library. This library, in fact, consisted of more than 100,000 video assets, and it just used a single media tailor configuration. Let us now take a look at some of the features of AWS Elemental Media Tailor. It can easily deliver targeted advertisements to any platforms. You have the flexibility to choose any addition server which supports IAB standard protocols. It improves the viewing experience as it matches the as it matches the video artifacts of the advertisement segments with the content stream, thereby providing a better quality of experience and enhancing viewership for end users. We'll be showing a demo covering this aspect. MediaTailor is also well integrated with CloudWatch, so you'll be able to create reports, dashboards, and troubleshoot issues by leveraging CloudWatch insights, matrices, and logs. This will also be covered in a demo very shortly. I would now hand over it to Naveen, who would be walking us through the MediaTailor demo. Over to you, Naveen.
Thanks, Anup. We will now see a simple SSAI configuration and show a live ad insertion demo. But before I start the demo, I would like to check with Tanya if there are any questions from the audience.
Yeah, I think Naveen, one question. How does the server-side ad insertion maintain the ad quality similar to the original content? Can you answer that for the audience, please?
Yeah. So server side ad insertion, I would focus my attention towards MediaTailor. So MediaTailor uses uh, some services in the background to transcode the advertisements in a way where it would match the exact video renditions as well as the video artifacts to ensure that the end users would view the same quality of video like the content stream. For the end user, it will not look like we are switching context at all because the bit rate and everything regarding the pixels as well would remain the same. So that is how MediaTailor is able to maintain the same quality of advertisements, which is similar to your content that you were watching prior to the ad break.
Got it. Thank you, Naveen. I think we can go ahead with the SSAI configuration. No more questions from the audience as of now.
Thanks, Tanya. So we'll now take a look at creating a simple server-side ad insertion configuration using Elemental MediaTailor. To create an Elemental MediaTailor configuration, search for MediaTailor on your AWS console search box. And once the MediaTailor window opens, you'll be able to notice all your configurations which I've already clicked, or you can create a new configuration. For this demo, we'll walk through a simple configuration which I had already created. I'll edit the configuration and walk you through what I've configured. You'll notice that it contains, something called required settings. And required settings contain three things, which is name, content source, and ad decision server. You'll also notice that the name field is blanked out. So once you give it a name, you cannot change it. So ensure that you give a meaningful name for future reference. The content source is essentially your origin URL or your CDN URL without the suffix of index.m3u8 or index.mpd at the end. And in this case, I've put a media package URL, which is my origin. And finally, the third important thing that you have to configure is an ad decision server. So I've configured an ad decision server, which would send a JSON response when media package queries it. Other things are optional. For example, things like configuration, aliases, log configuration. This is configured to 100% in my case to help me in troubleshooting. And finally, personalization. Under personalization, you can configure a live pre-roll ad decision server. You can also configure slate advertisements, which will insert a slate advertisement in case an ad decision server doesn't respond with JSON response, and various other things if required as per your use case. So once you click on save configuration, you'll be able to fetch the playback URL under endpoint prefixes. So I'll copy the HLS playback URL and test it on a HLS test player. So I'll paste it here and then append it with index.m3u8 at the end and hit the play button to test if the stream is playing back successfully. So once the stream loads, we'll be able to see some underlying content, which is the ever famous Big Bug Bunny, which we usually use in our demo videos about OTT. So having seen a MediaTailor playback, we will now go and see what is the underlying content on my origin, which is media package in my case. So once I hit the play button, you'll notice that the media package also plays back the same content as MediaTailor. Having seen a successful playback of media package and MediaTailor, we'll now schedule an ad break to see how ad insertion happens in real time on MediaTailor. So ad break will be scheduled on Media Live, which is my upstream encoder in this workflow. So I'll create a scheduled ad break on MediaTailor by using the console. So I'm going to give it a meaningful name, and then I would schedule an immediate ad break with an action type of splice insert. I would give it a ID for reference, and then I would schedule an ad break of say 30 seconds. This will be multiplied by 90,000. More information about it can be seen in the tooltip. And once I schedule an ad break, we'll be able to see advertisements being inserted on MediaTailor endpoint. So we will see references to the ad segments by leveraging something called developer tools. So we'll open developer tools on my browser, and I will examine one of the origin files to see how ad segments would look like. So I would click on a manifest sent by the origin and look at the response. And you will notice that it contains references to ad segments in the form of a specific path. And also, there is a discontinuity tag to ensure that a signal is sent to the players. And at the same time, you must have noticed that the content has switched from original content to ad break. And at the same time, media package still plays back the underlying content, whereas Media Tailor is showing you an ad break. So with this, we have seen that Media Tailor seamlessly inserts advertisement on the user devices without causing any kind of jittering or buffering. And once the ad break ends, the stream would switch over to the underlying content. So, with the help of a few clicks and a very simple configuration, you can monetize your OTT streams by leveraging Elemental Media Tailor. Having seen the demo, before I go ahead with another demo of troubleshooting Media Tailor issues, I would like to check with Tanya if there are any questions from the audience.
Yeah, one question, Naveen. Can I monetize my video streams without any sketchy markers?
Oh, that's a nice question, Tanya. Yes, you can. I mean, to be honest, Scutty markers are very important to signal to a server-side ad insertion service that this is the point where you would want to insert ad breaks. But yes, Elemental Media Tailor supports something called pre-roll, so you can insert advertisements on your streams uh, just when just when the user click on the play button. So with the help of pre-rolls, you can insert advertisement into your original content without the need of scutty markers at all.
Got it. Thank you. I hope that answers the questions from one of our audience who joined us today. Thank you, Naveen. Over to you.
Okay, so we will now see another demo where we will talk about some troubleshooting tips by leveraging CloudWatch logs and insights. MediaTailor is very well integrated with Amazon CloudWatch. So for the purpose of this demo, we had already configured an end-to-end live channel and scheduled an ad break of 100 seconds. However, the ad break was only filled with 30 seconds of advertisements. We were able to fetch the session ID by using the developer mode on our player, and we will use this session ID to identify issue behind this underfill. So to start the troubleshooting, search for CloudWatch on your AWS console and then launch CloudWatch Insights. Please note for MediaTailor to log the streams to CloudWatch, you must create an IAM role. More instructions about this IAM role can be seen in our documentation. So once the CloudWatch window opens up, click on CloudWatch Insights and select the appropriate log group. You would be presented with a list of log groups. For this particular case, we would choose add server interactions as the log group and then select the appropriate time window. You can, select either a custom time window or choose a pre-populated one. We're going to select 1 hour because the issue that happened about an hour ago. Uh, so I'm going to copy a query into my search box, and you would notice that I'm printing the fields like timestamp, origin ID, event type, session ID, and message. And I'm printing it in the ascending order of timestamp. I've also filtered with my session ID, which I grabbed from my playback session. And then I'm filtering with something called origin ID, which is my media tailor configuration. And once I hit the run query, I'll be presented with some event type options, and you would notice that the output contains add marker found. It then contains vast response, filled away a couple of beacons, and another ad marker found. So let us look at the first ad marker found. The first ad marker found would basically be a signal to the player that we are going out of the content stream, so it is a queue out marker. And the last ad marker found would be a QN, which would indicate to the player that we are streaming back to the original content, which is the origin stream. So let us take a look at the filled avail event type to see more information about how long was the ad break and how much was it filled with. So you can see the original duration of the ad break was 100 seconds in my case, which is what I explained before we you know looked at the queries. And the filled duration was only 30 seconds, so which means that the ad fill ratio was 30%. It is presented in a ratio, so zero point 0.3 in this case. So indeed the issue which was reported by the user is true. So let us take a look at uh, vast response, which is the response from the ad decision server, to see if we get some kind of clue about why was this underfill seen in my ad break. And examining the vast response, we would see that the ad decision server responded with just two advertisements, which were of 15 seconds each. So both these advertisements were successfully filled by MediaTailor in the ad break. As a result, the ad fill ratio was only 30%. Had the ad decision server responded with multiple advertisements, MediaTailor would have inserted all the advertisements successfully. And this is one of the most common scenarios which content owners or content providers face when integrating server-side ad insertion service into their origin streams. If they don't configure their ad decision server appropriately, their ad decision server would end up emitting or end up responding with limited advertisements. As a result, the ad break would be underfilled and the monetization opportunity would be lost as well. So, with the help of CloudWatch logs and insights, you can easily troubleshoot any issues with your OTT ad insertion. And MediaTailor provides transparent logging, so you can use CloudWatch insights to ensure that your ad breaks are properly filled, and as well as you identify the bottlenecks very easily. So before we go ahead, I would now like to check with Tanya if there are any questions from the audience.
Yeah, Naveen, one question. I think if you can just also shed some light on how do we monitor the media tailor performance? Is there any, list of pre-created matrix that we have?
Yeah, definitely. So since MediaTailor is very well integrated with CloudWatch, we do have pre-created metrics which can easily be used for your troubleshooting purpose. You can easily add them on your dashboards as well, so that you get a view of how the performance is. We will share the link of this pre-created metrics, which is in our documentation, which will help the audience to start monitoring their MediaTailor performance as well, in parallel to launching their MediaTailor configurations and monetizing their OTT streams.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Naveen. That was helpful.
Okay. So, having seen the demo, we will now talk about some best practices when you contact AWS support. So, yes, we understand that we have CloudWatch logs and metrics, which will help you to troubleshoot issues with MediaTailor. But then there can be still scenarios where logs and insights might not help you to find out the real reason behind the issue that you're noticing. So we will talk about some best practices, some important information that we require to help you identify the real reason behind the issue that you're noticing. So the most important thing that the support team requires is a configuration ARN. So each MediaTailor configuration would have a unique identifier, which is called an ARN. So this is one of the most important things that you must provide when you contact AWS support. And then the other thing that the AWS support would need is timestamp of the issue, because the logs can grow tremendously huge. It is very important that you share an accurate or an approximate timestamp where you noticed an issue. Or the third thing would be a session ID, because each user has its own unique session. So session ID either in debug mode or a hard capture replicating the issue would be very good for the support team to identify the real reason and focus their attention on a specific session where the issue was noticed. If you don't have a session ID in debug mode, it is all right. It is okay to share a session ID without being in debug mode. And finally, a media tailor playback URL for internal replication if the issue is still existent. So when you provide all of this, it becomes very easy for the support team to dive deep into the logs and identify what was the real reason behind the issue that you were noticing, and the root cause would be easily shared with you, which will help you prevent it in the future. Finally, here are some of the resources which we will post in the chat window for you to help you get started with your journey towards using AWS Elemental Media Tailor. So I will now hand over to Tanya because we have come to an end of the session to see if there are any further questions.
Thank you, Naveen, and thank you, Anup. I don't see any further questions from the audience. I think we are good. But is there anything else before we move on to the closing of the episode? Is there anything else that you would like to share for the audience?
Uh, no, we have well written blogs and documents which we will share in the chat, which will help the audience to get started with their journey towards using AWS Media Tailor. And as mentioned, we have a very good support team as well as a team of solution architects and technical account managers who can help you with any issues that you face with Media Tailor, be it proof of concept or be it full-fledged deployment. Will be there to support you if required.
Yeah. I
Thank you.
strongly urge the audience to try out the Media Tailor service on the AWS console.
Yes. Thank you, Naveen, and thanks, Anup. So, everyone, we covered today about the content personalization and monetization service, which is AWS Elemental Media Tailor. I hope this was helpful. And if there are any questions that were not answered today, you can post your questions on repost.aws, where one of our experts can provide you with an answer to your questions. And even your question could become one of the topics for our future shows. And if you have any feedback for us, please check the chat box on the right side for a link to our survey. And you can also email us at awssupportsyou@amazon.com. We really want to hear from you. Tell us what else you would like to see on these shows that we kind of broadcast every alternate week in IST time zones, 10 a.m. And please join us in 2 weeks on November 23rd at 10 a.m. IST, where our experts will be introducing you to EMR serverless design patterns. That's for the next show. So for today, thank you again, everyone, for joining us. Happy cloud computing.